Are you being a selfish asshole with your marketing? Let's find out.
Hi, I'm Katie McManus, business strategist and money mindset coach, and welcome to Weeniecast. Squirrel.
The number one fear that my clients have about posting on social media when they first start their business is that people are going to see them posting and think that they're doing it just for the attention. That they're sharing personal stories, talking about their work, maybe the occasional selfie or picture of their dog or cat, just because they like attention.
Hey, look at me!
It's so ingrained in our subconscious, especially those of us who grew up with ADHD, either knowing or not knowing, that it is bad to call attention to yourself. Calling attention to yourself means that you are selfish, that you don't care about others, that you are a distraction. And oftentimes people also tag that desperation vibe to the person. And it doesn't matter who I talk to. It doesn't matter what country they grew up in. It doesn't matter their gender. It doesn't matter any other circumstance in their life. Everyone is terrified that people will see them posting, calling attention to their business, and think, oh, they just want attention. And the common thread is that calling attention to yourself is borderline evil. And if it's not evil, it's pathetic. Well, I have some news for you. I don't know if it's good or bad news, depending on how you look at it. Calling attention to yourself is the only way to get clients. So you're going to have to do it if you want this business to be successful. And the good news is that there are so many ways to call attention to yourself, to your good work, to the types of clients that you work with. And the bad news is that it's going to feel gross the first couple dozen times you do it. So we are absolutely going to talk through how you can get over this, because this is going to be one of the things that holds you back from having any kind of success in your business. But first, we have to look at where this comes from. Because if we're not acknowledging where these seeds got planted, we can't rip the tree out. And actually, I say tree, it's more of a Jack the Giant beanstalk kind of plant going on here. It has deep, deep roots and it goes all the way up to the sky. And it taps into some really scary shit that we believe about ourselves that just isn't true. And I hate to say it, it comes from some really old school ways of raising children on one side. It also comes from going to public school, going to school with teachers who are also raised in that old school manner, going to school with kids who maybe weren't that nice. Think Mean Girls.
We don't do this a lot, so this is like a really huge deal.
We want to invite you to have lunch with us every day for the rest of the week.
Oh, it's okay. Coolness. So we'll see you tomorrow.
On Wednesdays, we wear pink.
Squirrel, squirrel, squirrel.
And also this fear that we were different. This fear, if you knew that you had ADHD, then you knew that you were different. But if you didn't know for sure, you always sensed that there was something about you that wasn't the same as other kids. And being different as a child, being different as a human is innately terrifying, right? Because our ancestors, if they were too different from everyone else in their tribe or their village, they ran the risk of either getting burned at the stake as a witch or getting ostracized and kicked out so that they had to go and survive in the wilderness all by themselves, which the human beings of the past and of the present are not meant to survive or thrive in isolation. So this taps into our survival instincts, for one. So I invite you to think back to when you were a kid. I bet you remember some kind of formative memory where you maybe wore like your favorite dinosaur t-shirt to school, or maybe you wore your light up sneakers, or something that made you stick out. It was probably something that you really, really loved, something that you felt was such a great representation of your personality. For me, every single one of the dresses that I owned, I named for princesses from the Disney movies. I had my Jasmine dress, I had my Cinderella dress, I had my Ariel dress. There was a certain point where I stopped wearing them. I don't remember specifically what it was that happened, but I became very embarrassed of how obsessed I was with the Disney princesses. So much so that when I had a birthday cake one year with the Disney princesses on, I immediately, after I blew out the candles, I hid the little figurines that came on it, even though everyone had already seen them. This is something that kids innately do. You know, when they get to a certain age, they start being mean to each other. They start identifying differences. And of course, we know this comes from the parents. This comes from the people they're spending the most time with. I don't believe that there's a naturally born this way mean child. It's behavior that's learned. And unfortunately, those of us who naturally kind of stick out often become the targets of that. Especially if you have ADHD and you have a little bit of impulsivity. I guarantee you there are moments where you spoke out in class where you got the stink eye from the teacher or you got punished in some way. And you couldn't help it. It's genuinely just part of who you are and how you operate. And yet it was made to be this awful, terrible thing that you had to hide about yourself. And then, of course, not all of this stuff has to be done to us to make us want to make ourselves smaller and invisible. We can see other people getting torn down for how they're different, for how they put themselves out there, for how they call attention to themselves. And we learn very quickly that if they're getting torn down, I'll probably get torn down if I do the same thing. So I better stay quiet. I better hide. I better stay small. So before we get to changing this, before we shift your mindset on this, we have to have a lot of compassion for younger you. Whatever age you were, where you got told that you were just seeking attention and that was bad, or you became afraid of sticking out, of being loud, being too visible. Whatever happened in your formative years, we have to send so much love to that person, to that little kid. They didn't have the protection that they deserved in that moment. They didn't have the understanding that they deserved in that moment. A big thing that I hear with my clients, and this is across the board, it doesn't matter if they work for themselves or are still full-time employed and are working on their business on the side, is when they're sick. And I experience this as well. When we're sick as adults with ADHD, we tend to have so much anxiety about calling out to work. We tend to have so much fear about contacting clients and letting them know that we need to cancel or move our sessions, about calling our employer and saying, hey, I'm not well, I need to take today off. And often there's this performative requirement where we feel like we have to go and get proof. We have to go and get proof that we're really sick. We have to be able to display that we're really sick. I remember talking to a friend who also had ADHD, and she shared with me that she always felt so much happier when she was sick in a way that affected her voice because she felt like her boss would believe her. Versus if she were vomiting and it wasn't affecting her vocal cords and she sounded perfectly healthy on the phone, she felt like she would walk into work the next day and just get fired. And I have a theory. This is just a theory. I have not done any research to verify this. But I know as a kid and as a teenager, I often had stomach aches. And as an adult who's done a lot of mental health work and worked with a therapist and, pays attention to mental health TikTok, I know now that those stomach aches were anxiety. Those stomach aches weren't me actually being sick. They were anxiety. But as a child, I didn't know how to communicate that because it wasn't part of the vernacular. My parents didn't have any understanding of the fact that I had anxiety. And they also didn't understand because they weren't taught that anxiety shows up in children as stomach aches, sometimes headaches. And so as kids with ADHD who have these physical symptoms because they don't know how to protect their energy and really manage themselves well yet, the best thing we can come up with is, I'm sick, I need to stay home. I'm sick, I need to step away from this group right now. And I think for a lot of us, it happened so often that sometimes maybe our caretakers or our teachers or the school nurse or whoever the adults in the room were started suspecting that we weren't actually sick. And because there wasn't that understanding of how anxiety shows up in children's bodies, the logical next step is you just want to stay home, you just want attention. Now, it's funny, every time I talk to a client and we're going through this conversation, maybe because they are actively sick or they just got over being sick and they feel terrible, the fear is, I'm worried people think I just want attention. Every single time it comes up. And it's funny because, I follow the trail. And I always ask, when you were sick as a child, when you didn't feel well and you needed to stay home, either for your mental health or you genuinely didn't feel well, what did you do when you were home? And usually the answer is, I stayed in bed, I watched TV, I hid in my room. And it's amazing because none of those things are seeking the attention of your caregiver. None of those things are, look at me, I'm so sick, woe is me, I'm being so dramatic. We labeled ourselves with being attention seekers for genuinely just needing to do some self-care, genuinely needing to take a break from all the stimulation that was happening at school, in our lives, because it was just a little too much for us in the moment. For whatever reason, we slapped that with the label, you're attention seeking, even though attention was never the result. This is something that our brains have made so insidiously bad about us that if you really struggle with this, I urge you to go and work with a therapist on this. But also know that this fear is completely irrational. Not completely irrational. Sure, there are always going to be haters online. There are always going to be people who see your stuff and are like, rah, rah, rah. They're just miserable fucks. Do you want your life to be run by miserable fucks for the rest of your life? They're always going to find something to tear down about other people. But here's the other thing about these miserable fucks is that they will never be your clients. And people like that will never be more successful than you. The reason they're so miserable is because they will never tackle the fear that keeps them small, that keeps them quiet, that keeps them hiding. And so the fact that you have the audacity, you have the bravery, you have just the sheer willpower to put yourself out there, even if you're scared, even if you do it imperfectly, scares the crap out of them. Because if you can do it, they should be able to do it. And they know it. But for whatever reason, they have chosen to let that fear run their lives. And what's ironic, it's really a fear of each other. It's a fear of the other miserable fucks in the world. It's like the worst pyramid scheme you could be a part of. Could you imagine if Amway were labeled the miserable fucks department? Like, oh God, they wouldn't have been able to ruin so many families' financial future if they were named that way properly, unfortunately. If you're part of the MLM scheme, please stop listening to any of my stuff. You're banished from my world. I don't do MLMs. It's one of the things that I think is the saddest scheme because they really prey on people who are so desperate to have a solid income, who generally don't have a whole lot of money to spare. And then they go on and ruin all these friendships because no one wants to get sucked into that shit. And it's this downward spiral of their life. So yeah, no MLMs, side tangent, get out of here. So if they're never going to be clients and they're not further ahead of you, so you can't learn anything from them, why are you listening to them? And I always like to remind my clients, it's your account. You own the delete button. You own the block button. If anyone's showing up and being a jerk in your comments, you have full permission to delete their comment and block them. Just because you're putting yourself out in the public does not mean that you have to accept whatever attention is sent your way. And this is especially true for you ladies out there, because men on the internet can be kind of gross. And really, here's the shift that we have to fully embrace about this whole situation, this fear of people being mean to us on the internet if we put ourselves out there. The bare truth here is you're the one being the asshole. You're the one that's projecting onto all these lovely, supportive human beings who want to see you thrive and succeed, that they're going to judge you. You're the one making up stories in your head that they're at home saying all these mean things about you. You're the one who thinks that there are people out there who are so obsessed with you that all they're going to do all day long is sit around criticizing you. And full permission to be that. If that is who you are and you want to project that on other people, who am I to make that wrong? You want to make yourself the center of the world for everyone who knows you? Sure, go for it. This is the point, is there's nothing innately bad about being the center of attention. And I know I'll get pushback from some people on that. It's what you do with that attention that makes you good or bad. If with that attention, you're like, come on, guys, let's go gather rocks and throw them at small children at the playground. Yeah, you're a terrible human being. You should be put in jail. Those poor children. And the playgrounds, like playground paint doesn't stand up to rocks being thrown at it. I know it's not as serious a grievance as like children getting rocks thrown at them, but it is something that you could do that's like property damage. Don't do that. It'll cost your local taxpayers money. But if with that attention, you're saying, hey, if you have this problem and I can help you with that problem, I think that makes you a really good person. I think that makes you someone who has a gift, who isn't being a stingy, selfish person with their gift and is offering to help other human beings. Which brings me to my next mindset shift that I want you to have when it comes to putting yourself out there and really dealing with this fear of, oh my God, like I'm going to be calling attention to myself. There are so many people out there who need your help, and they need your help. They need to connect with you because you and they have some kind of connection. You have things in common. You have a shared sense of humor. You might come from the same background. You have an understanding of who they are and what their life is like that they're not going to get with other people. There are so many business coaches out there. There are so many people who can help you start a business. I'm not for everyone. But the people that I am for, I can help so much better than other people. The clients who like really lame Harry Potter jokes, by the way, J.K. Rowling, don't agree with her stance on trans people. Just, I love the books. I like to separate it from her. Just a little side note. But if you enjoy a good like Harry Potter reference, I'm your gal. If you want to nerd out about West Wing, that's me. If you like kind of like weird, inappropriate jokes in group coaching sessions, that, makes people giggle and makes learning how to run a business, which is really scary, a lot more fun, then I'm absolutely your person. But if you want a business coach who leverages shame and pressure to get you to do stuff, I'm not your person. You can go and find so many other business coaches for that. Whatever your personality, your sense of humor, your background, whatever, all that makes you the perfect person to help a certain set of people out there in the world. And without you, they will not be able to accomplish whatever it is that's possible for them. And so if you're not willing to put yourself out there, if you're not willing to be brave and deal with some potential haters online, some potential trolls whose voices don't matter anyway, just because you're afraid, you're actually being incredibly selfish because you're robbing them of that future they could have access to if they work with you. And I want to share, when I started growing my business online, looking back at that content, I cringe. It was not good. I've gotten so much better in the years since I started. Some of those posts, like it feels like reading something that I wrote in middle school. I literally, sometimes when I'm going through and kind of sorting through old content to see what I can repurpose and recycle, I like have to get up and like walk it off. I'm so embarrassed that I put that stuff out there. Here's the truth, is that it got me clients. Even the bad, cringe, embarrassing, not well-written, crappy content that I did when I first started doing this, that still got me clients. Because people can't hire you if they don't know that you exist. That's the bare minimum. Never have I ever just gone out with a fistful of cash, with my eyes closed, just like trying to find someone who I could give the money to do something for my business without knowing what I need. If you want to try it, that's a great way to get robbed and to lose money. Not a great way to hire someone. And if you're standing on the street just waiting for someone to do that, you're never going to get clients. The other thing I want to remind you is that we're so lucky that we have social media right now. Back in the day, you'd have to pay for a spread in the newspaper. You'd have to rent an office on a main street, put out a sign, and just hope that people saw it. The people walking down the street just so happen to look up and read your sign and think, oh yeah, I could use that help. Cool. Now, even if you only get 100 views on your post and you're posting every day for 30 days, for instance, yeah, that's still 3,000 people who now know that you exist. Another option is you could stand on a street corner handing out flyers. Do you know how many hours you'd have to stand out there handing out flyers to people who probably aren't your ideal client? Beauty about social media is that you can use keywords, you can use hashtags. You can engage with other people on social media who are in the vicinity of your work, who are going to be in front of your ideal clients. you can manipulate it so that you're more likely to show up in front of your ideal clients so that they know that you exist. And I know it's scary. And I know it feels gross to say, look at me, look at me. But you're not just doing it for no reason. You're not doing it for the sake of being that kid in class who constantly has something to share. You're not doing it for the sake of gathering people to go throw rocks at children. Thank God. You're doing it to help people. And you're doing it to help yourself so that you can have a successful business, so that you can have a life that you actually enjoy, where you have control over your time and your freedom. There's nothing inherently bad about that. This is less about ADHD and more about people who have this desire to help others. There's this belief that in order to be a true helper, we have to also be poor. There's like this like very Catholic model of like, oh, cool, I want to help others. So now I have to give up all my worldly possessions and then go live the life of a pauper in a convent and not stick out or be special at all. No. That's not how this works. Like the Catholic Church is worth billions. There's not a single nun or priest who has given up all their worldly belongings to go and work for them who's lacking food or lacking a place to sleep. Okay? You do not have that kind of backup. You do not have that kind of support from a greater institution. Wouldn't that be cool if there was like a church of entrepreneurs that like wasn't religious at all, but it just like had money to support entrepreneurs who wanted to start businesses? Like maybe I'll start one. Maybe I will actually become a religious figurehead of nothing. But like, here, I'm going to support you to start this. Oh my God, that would be so funny. Think of like, instead of like a church with all those like alcoves that like are dedicated to saints, there would be like an alcove that's like, here's a little seminar on SEO. And then here's where we're going to go to do a little photo shoot. And then here's another alcove to the patron saint of websites. This could be an idea. Although I'd have to take the word church out. That would be misleading. People would come and get really confused. We'll have to brainstorm this and like idea board it. You do not have that kind of support. So there's nothing wrong with you needing to support yourself and make money. The fact that you're doing so by helping other people is just icing on the cake. Lastly, the things that make you different. I know it's so hard as a person with ADHD who's always thought differently, spoken differently, viewed the world differently. Especially growing up, especially trying to integrate into workplaces where everyone else seems to have an easier time. It's all built for them. This is the beauty of starting your own business. You get to design things that work for you. You get to design a life that works for you, but only if you stop letting your life be run by the judgments of others. And if you're struggling with fears like this that are keeping you quiet, keeping you small, keeping you hidden, I work with every single one of my clients on this particular problem. This fear of calling attention to yourself is not unique to you. I know it feels like you are gloriously, uniquely fucked up in your own way, but you're not. And I know that makes you less special, but it also makes this so much easier to overcome. And what'll make this easier to get over is being in a community with people who all struggle with the same thing. It's one of the reasons why I started and launched the hyper-focus community for ADHD business owners. Because we get so in our own heads about all the ways in which we're too afraid to show up or, the world's not set up for us, so like, I'll just step back. We don't realize that it's just the neurotypical world. It's just the world that wasn't designed for how our brains work. But when we find each other, when we're able to say, hey, I'm having this problem, how do you guys deal with this? And hear from a bunch of other people who also have ADHD, who've done the work and who have figured out a way to make the work for them. We see that it's not a failure on our part. It's just a failure on our world. And you'll be shocked how quickly you can get to work once you realize that you're not the only one who struggles with it. So if you're curious about the hyperfocus community, then I invite you to go check it out at weeniecast.com/hyperfocus. And of course, that link is in the show notes. And so this morning, I'm wearing shorts today And the cat was like begging for attention. So I picked him up and put him in my lap. And like, he's like clawing the fuck out of my legs. And like, I'm like, stop, stop, stop. And then Luna comes over and she puts her wet beard right on my knee. And I'm like, this is the worst. This is hell. Like, if I go to hell, this is what it's going to be for eternity.
Squirrel, squirrel.